Welcome back. Breaking news. We're covering that news tonight of Iranian retaliation against U.S. forces in Iraq firing ballistic missiles against two bases. The Pentagon says two bases were attacked at approximately 5:30 Eastern Time. We're going to go now to Trey Yingst in Baghdad for the latest. Trey?
Lou, good evening. A major escalation by the Iranians here in Iraq, as reports indicate more than 30 surface-to-surface missiles have been fired towards the Al-Assad air base in western Iraq. This is an Iraqi base that houses many U.S. troops, and part of the reason this is such an escalation is these missiles are coming from Iranian territory, and there are reports that this attack is ongoing. At this point, we do not know. All we have is the statements from the Iranians this week that said they were going to strike back as a result of President Trump making that decision to take out Iran's top military leader, Qasem Soleimani, outside of Baghdad's international airport just last week. All of this, though, ratcheting up tension in the region. What started out and what looked like was simply going to be an ongoing proxy war, something that we've seen often in the region, has now turned to using missiles that are being fired from Iran into Iraqi territory. Remember, earlier this week, we saw a number of statements, not only from President Trump, but also from the Iranians, and it seemed like sort of a ping-pong back and forth of if you strike us, we'll strike you. If you strike us, we'll strike you. What we have seen tonight, though, these missiles being fired towards an Iraqi base with U.S. troops may force the United States to respond if these comments this week by President Trump, Secretary Esper, and Secretary Pompeo do end up coming true. President Trump this week a number of times indicating that he would strike back at Iran, even be willing to hit some of their cultural sites. Fox's John Roberts today even asking him in the Oval Office about the situation with Iran, and the president confirming much of that information, saying he would be willing to strike Iran within its own territory. This, too, is a major step forward in this larger conflict of what we are seeing unfold in the region. Remember, there was a year straight, really, of Iranian provocative action in the region. They were targeting Western-linked oil infrastructure. You also saw the Iranians shooting down a U.S. drone. The president each time saying that he was watching but wasn't going to respond. Even striking the largest oil field in the world in Saudi Arabia, it took the Iranians ordering one of their militias in Iraq, Kataib Hezbollah, striking an Iraqi base that housed American troops. It took actually killing an American contractor and injuring 4 American service members for President Trump to respond. He struck that group, Kataib Hezbollah, ordering those strikes. That led to then the embassy being stormed here in Baghdad, and then as a result of all of this unfolding, we saw that early Friday morning drone strike outside of Baghdad's international airport, killing a top militia leader and also the leader of Iran's military. So moving forward, no one really knows what is going to happen. The situation in Baghdad today, many people were concerned about Iraq being caught in the middle of what does appear to be an escalating conflict between the United States and Iran. But the information we can confirm tonight, reports do indicate that more than 30 missiles have been fired from Iranian territory towards an Iraqi base that houses American forces. The Department of Defense confirming that missiles have been fired tonight, and there are reports that this attack is ongoing. We will continue to monitor the situation throughout the evening. Lou?
Trey, thank you very much. And there in Baghdad, any sign of street demonstrations, any kind of civil unrest there?
It's been very quiet in Baghdad today. Most of the people we were talking about earlier in our report, they simply said they were hoping things remained calm. Many of the Iraqis in Baghdad have lived through so many conflicts, and they understand how quickly these things can unravel. So right now in Baghdad, things are calm, and the two bases, according to the Department of Defense, that were hit are in northern Iraq, in Erbil. This is in Kurdistan, in Kurdish territory, and then in western Iraq, the Al-Assad air base, both housing American troops, these two bases, but they are Iraqi bases. As for Baghdad, there is a base relatively close called Base Taji, Camp Taji, very close to Baghdad. There were reports earlier that this base was also targeted. We have not been able to confirm those reports, but in the past, Baghdad has seen a number of parts of this conflict hitting the city. Just a few days ago, there were 5 rockets fired into Baghdad's green zone just off to my left, and U.S. forces have been on high alert out of concern that some of these Iranian-backed Iraqi Shia militias in the region could start attacking the green zone, maybe even the U.S. embassy again. And we have seen American Apache helicopters really throughout the late afternoon and the early evening the past few days, firing flares and doing patrols just to ensure that the American personnel here in Baghdad remain safe. Lou?
Those service members dispatched to Baghdad to protect the embassy and U.S. personnel there. There are in the helicopter protection overhead. Is it almost constant now?
In the late afternoon, it is. Right as the sun is about to go down, we've seen a lot of helicopter activity, mostly American Apaches. And right when it gets dark, you can see when they're firing the flares in an effort to try to avoid getting shot down. The big concern here, again, is that these Iranian-backed Iraqi Shia militias, which there are a number of them operating in and around Baghdad, would ultimately try to target American forces. As you noted, the president did dispatch additional American Marines here to try to protect the embassy personnel after that siege happened last week. The larger concern, though, for the civilians on the ground, as we reported earlier, and we talked about this really throughout the day on Fox, is there are concerns among civilians here that if you're not supporting the Iranian regime or any of these Iranian-backed Iraqi Shia militias, that you could be a target. And as an American citizen in Baghdad, you certainly are a target. All Americans have been urged to leave Iraq. A number of airlines that are not even related to the Americans of the United States have stopped flights in and out of Baghdad, and these include major airlines in the region, including Royal Jordanian, Egypt Air. They've actually stopped flying in and out of Baghdad. Even to get here, we couldn't fly directly from where we were in Amman, Jordan, reporting previously. So moving forward, not only are you going to see airlines and other types of personnel limiting the times and places you can get into Iraq, but also militaries. Today, the Canadian military announced they were going to remove all troops that are assisting American forces and also the Iraqi security forces. They're going to be moving those troops to Kuwait, where President Trump has dispatched more than 3,000 American soldiers from the 82nd Airborne down in North Carolina. The concern, obviously, not only for the United States, but its allies in the region, is that an attack like this could happen. What we are seeing tonight, more than 30 missiles, surface-to-surface missiles fired from Iranian territory towards a base that houses U.S. troops. This was sort of the nightmare scenario that everyone was talking about, because this is a major, major escalation from what we have seen by the Iranians or their proxies in the region. And remember, there are a number of Iranian proxies in the region, not only here in Iraq, but in Syria, many are Iranian-backed militia groups, but also places like Lebanon and the Gaza Strip. Lou?
Thank you very much, Trey. Stay safe. Trey Yingst reporting from Baghdad, and we will be hoping for the very best for everyone there in Iraq.